Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to this session of the book club. We have had lots of interesting books. Today's is absolutely fascinating. So I'm sure that everyone who's present today is really going to put on their thinking caps during the discussion and think about it. Now, before we go further and before I introduce our presenter to you, the co-founder of this book club, Satish, has something to say. So Satish, yes, let's hear you.
Hi there, everyone. We talk about the book club any chance we meet. And we talked to some person sitting next to me and told her about our book club. She turned out to be a Maharashtrian married to a German and a Pune girl herself. And she was so interested that she has sent her latest book. Is it okay? Can you see it clearly?
Take it further away. It's too close.
The secret of more, or something like that.
Yes, it is.
More.
So we met her
The
in
Secret of
Istanbul.
More. Secret of More is the name
Secret
of the
of
book.
more.
Yeah. And and it's quite a book. It's about a guy who comes in from his village and starts business in Bombay and moves into the film line and other areas, and how he grows into it, what problems he has, what happens to his love life, etc., etc. All that it's written. I have this book. Now, I would like one of you to volunteer. Send me a message on that there, so we'll know that who's volunteering and we can give it. You have to read it in 10 days. For 4 to 5 weeks, you have to be ready to talk about it.
And you can be in conversation with the author because she has offered to be
Yes,
there.
we can get the author to be
Yes.
to come. Now, there is another book which I like very much. I started reading a book called An Island. An Island is a book written by, what's her name? Karen Jenkins. And she was if you look at it, they say it's one of the listed for the Booker Prize. And it's a small book. It talks about an island on which there is a lighthouse, and there's one man there. Why is he there? Because he's run away from everything in life and he wants to be there to look after that. Suddenly one day, another person comes on, he was watched in, and the language is not known, they don't talk the same language, and how they could react and what happens is because suddenly he's open to other thoughts, etc., in the world of today. Otherwise, he had lost himself in that island. It's a very interesting book. I think, please give it a chance and see what you can make out of that. Okay? Now,
It's a very short book, but seems quite intense.
now, this is a lady called Ruby Gupta. She gave me a call all the way from Dehradun. She's a professor of English at the Indian Military Academy. And I don't know where she heard about us. And said someone in Dehradun told her about us, and she came through. It's a story which is little, as you say, a generic one about what's happening around us, etc. And fine, I would rate it as maybe not our highest caliber, but still very much worth the while. I'm going to ask you guys to please send us emails or SMSs saying that you would be willing to look at this book, etc. And I'll see how they get to you. So we will be shortlisting you shortly for that. So all the very best, and let's keep the spirit of books kept on going. It's wonderful when you have a book in your hand, and I had 3 books in the hand, and there's a 4th one that has come in, which I'm going to go through it, and I'll then bring it out for you in the next meeting. Okay, guys? So please, 3 books. The Secret of Leafing Pagoda is one. The second one is An Island by Karen Jennings. And the third one is The Secret of More by Tejaswini Apte-Raham.
I'll be
Tejaswini,
putting the details of the front covers on the. I've taken the photograph on the screen. I'll be putting on the book club shortly, immediately.
very
Yeah,
good.
that makes
Perfect.
sense.
That's
Great.
perfect. Perfect.
So,
And
so these are three books that Satish has suggested because they have come to him and to his notice. And of course, there are so many books out there. I'm sure some of you read the New York Times ratings, the books of the month, the books of the year, and so on and so forth. Anything that catches your fancy and you think is worth sharing, please let us know. Now, in the last meeting,
I'm going to ask Wispy. Wispy, look at the three books that I've talked about. I will give everyone what do you call the little bit of the story. I will pass it around to everyone. Look at it and see which of the three books you would like to speak. I would like Wispy to speak there. Also, Friana. Friana is being very quiet. Friana, we would like you to come and speak.
Friana is the one who immediately offered last week when I mentioned that we wanted volunteers. She promptly rang me up and said she would like to do Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky.
Excellent.
So,
Excellent. Then I think Deepa Gupta, I would like you to take this up and see. It's very easy. Take one of the lighter books and talk about it. And where is Kapila? Kapila was another person. Where are you, Kapila? And where, Kapila, where are you based?
Dr. Berucha's wife.
yeah.
Kapila, where are you based?
In Pune, Satish.
Dr. Barucha's wife.
Oof.
Sorry.
Okay. So Kapila, we can
Satish,
say.
Satish, I think let's get on with the discussion.
So Kapila,
now.
I would like you to look at the books and
I'll
let me know.
talk to you. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So
All the best, Moini, you take over.
Today's book is called The Hard Road Out by Jihyun Park. She is from North Korea. Now, this is a country that we know very little about. We hardly hear about it, except in rather ominous tones. We wonder what's going on in North Korea, and we hear little snippets of news, and that's how we build up our image. Now, these totalitarian countries, which are not open to the world, are rather mysterious. And it's a rare chance when someone from North Korea manages to get out and writes their story. So Mukul has picked up this book to do today, and I think it's going to be very interesting. Now, Mukul Ahmed has an MPhil in political science from Delhi University. She has a diploma in women's studies from Pune University. She is very interested in women-centric writing, especially from the third world, from disadvantaged sections, and so on. You might remember that she had discussed Dalit stories some time ago, and that was excellent food for thought. So Mukul, over to you with this book, which is not a novel, it's a true story, right? Over to you.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. This is the book I'm going to discuss, The Hard Road Out. As Mohini said, it's by Jihyun Park, a North Korean. My first little thing would be why I chose this book at all. I read the review of this book in the Financial Times. I found it extremely interesting. A lady from North Korea runs away. What do I know about North Korea? Next to nothing. It's what they call a hermit country, and except that they have some, missiles now and then, and that it's a country under the Soviet shadow or an extension of the Soviet Union. I know nothing else. So it would be very interesting to know why a very well-educated woman chose to run away from there. And as I read the review, I got more and more interested. I was interested in what the lady and her family were before she ran away, then her escape, and how she came and as a refugee settled in the UK. So these are some of the things that I was looking at. I wondered if it had lost anything in translation and whether the book being presented in English would be, embellished. But then I read corroborating reviews and realized that it wasn't. It was presented very raw and it gave us the situation as it is, because I got another book by a Korean called The Girl with the Seven Faces, because now I seem to gravitate towards that. So everybody starts lending me books on the same subject. And when I read that review, it seemed to me the same thing, the same kind of thing that the girl had been through. And Latika was very, kind to share with me one of the film reviews that she did for North Korean films, for a North Korean film, about 7 people who'd run away from the north to the south, and they were interviewed. And they said almost the same thing as the heroine of this place. So I didn't, of this book. So I didn't think it was an exaggeration to be sort of presented to the West. So that's what I liked. And then I continued with it. This is a book of extreme courage. I think no ordinary person would have been able to go through what this young lady went through and lived to tell the tale of brutality, of repression, of not having a single moment to yourself, of not being allowed to think for yourself. And sitting here in a middle-class family, in middle-class Pune, I wondered if such a country exists, if such people exist on this surface of this earth, and whether really there are lives like that, or was it something that we just read about some time ago? And no, it was told to me that, yeah, it does exist. So even further, I decided I must go ahead and read. So a little bit about Korea. It's as you know, it's a peninsula in East Asia. It's just below China and Russia. It borders both of them. And it is divided into with South Korea at what is called the 38th parallel north. Its recent history was such that it was occupied before the World War by the Japanese. And after the Japanese lost in the Second World War and had to surrender, they asked the Soviets to move in quickly. And they did, but they were able to occupy only the north. And the USA quickly occupied the south. So you have the Democratic People's Republic of the north, and then you have the Republic of Korea in the south, too, with completely different political setups. And, so now this became and remained a socialist country, as you would realize. That is called the demilitarized zone also, the 38th parallel. That's where the fighting ceased. From 1950 to 53, North Korea again made an attempt to unify the two countries by sort of attacking the South, but that didn't succeed. Korea was basically an agrarian country, farmers, but with the Soviet Union and the Japanese also there, they became a centralized economy with mines, with minerals being mined, steel factories, and so on. There were many Koreans who began going to Manchuria to be able to work there. So that was their life. And the first leader was called Kim Il-sung. Kim Il-sung was the first leader. Now, everything centered around this, what is called the great leader or our great leader. He formed a personality cult and people were devoted to him. So you had to bow your head in his presence. He could do no wrong. He and his family had made so many sacrifices for our great nation and for our nation to become great. So that was how he was viewed. Even personal birthdays were not celebrated, except that of the great leader on the 15th of August, or the 15th of April. Every family had a portrait of the great leader in their home. It was reverentially cleaned up every day, and books with his sayings were also kept ready. The regime that was set out by this great leader was brutal, as I said, extremely repressive, full of spies everywhere. You never knew who told on whom. And the structure was such that no matter what you're doing, once a week, whether you were a student or a teacher or somebody who lived in a colony or a block of flats, you had to meet to be able to hear the teachings of the great leader and also to be able to make confession. So you had to say what you didn't do or what you did wrong or something wrong that was done by your colleagues also. You had to tell on them, and then of course you had to be prepared to be told upon by you. Everybody was given work, everybody. The mother of our author, she lived with her sister and her brother and her parents in a very modest house within a block of flats. All the flats were the same. They were the toilets were at the end of the corridor. The light was very dim and it had to be put off by 7 in the evening because they were afraid of South Korean and American raids. There was very, very little to eat. Everybody wore the same clothes. The children wore the same shoes because that was all that was available in the shops. There was nothing new or different. You couldn't go shopping for this, that, or the other. Food items were limited, so you could buy just those. Everyone had to work till they were bone tired, whether it was the children or the young adults. The military training was compulsory, and during holidays, you also had to go to the countryside to be able to help the farmers as unpaid labor. That again was bone tiring. As a result of that, people didn't speak to each other because they were constantly tired, constantly tired. Children had to fend for themselves because their mothers were busy looking after the building, doing something for the country, but it was said that it was done for you, for your betterment. So there was no time for a family get together, emotional build up. The sons who went into the army, they were kept away for as many as 10 years. So this entire build of a family feeling wasn't there. But there were also Confucian values, which meant that you had to not argue with your seniors. You had to keep your head down while talking to them. If it were your grandmother, even more so. There were family loyalties. There were family duties. And the family duties were, if any member was ill or had died, then, and he is your immediate family member. For example, Jihyun's father, when her grandmother died, all her uncles came to live with them because there was nobody to take care of them in the countryside. Now, Jihyun's mother had to somehow manage food for the new family, extended members of the family that had arrived, because you had to, it was your duty to look after them. So that is why she started she was an entrepreneur. She started black marketeering. She borrowed some money, went across the border to China. The border was quite close. And there she bought cigarettes and she bought dried octopus. And she came and sold it here to whoever could afford it. And that's how she got money, and they used to get a little more to eat. One day they were actually able to buy 20 eggs because every day they just had rice porridge and rice and boiled rice and sometimes barley. So one day father got them 20 eggs and he told his wife, boil all of them right away. And each of us will have 4, and we'll all consume them right now. But the mother, who was more sensible, said, what do we do with the eggshells? If they're thrown into the bin, then everybody will know we had 20 eggs or we had many eggs. So they were crushed and powdered, and in the middle of the night, they were thrown away, buried under the tree. So these kind of things they had to do because your food then is not the same as somebody else's. In spite of all this, Jihyun was a happy child, she said. She didn't have time with her parents, but then she played with her sister. She played with the other children in the block. And she was a very bright child. She, her sister, and her brother were very, very good at maths. In school, as I said, they also had a lot of work to do. There was duty. They had to polish their desks. They had to sweep the floors of their classrooms, the corridors. They had to wax the woodwork. And that's how it was. They never knew that any other life. Studies were hard, but she didn't find them too hard. We are never told anywhere what the studies contained. But she found maths easy, and she found that she could help other students if she got the time. There was very little time actually to even help somebody else. Now, this was her kind of family background. As I said, there wasn't any coming together, and there was this mixture of the great leaders' teachings and Confucius's teachings. As you know, Confucius was the philosopher saint of 6 BC, 5 BC, and his teachings were ancestor worship and ethical living. So they were supposed to so instead of ancestors, it was much more the great leaders worship, and that's how it came about. And as I said, nothing belonged to you, everything belonged to the state. So what you were doing was for the greatness of our great country, and see how our leaders have made our country the great country. But there was one small snag. The father, because of his Sangam is the status in society. He was of a good Sangam, so he was, they were highly placed. But the mother, because he belonged to the Korean Workers' Party, but the mother did not belong there. She did not belong to the party. As a result, their Sangam went down, and the children, they got their school admissions, but after that, to get anything else, say college admissions, in spite of very good results, jobs was very, very difficult for them. The grandmother, there was a custom, probably it's a custom from Confucius' teachings. The girls went to live for 2 or 3 years when they were very little with their grandmother. So Uni, the sister of our hero, of our author, she went to live there till she was 7, from 4 to 7. She heard stories about mythology, about their great kings in the past, and she was pampered and had all the time and attention given to her by her grandmother. And then she was brought back, and Jihyun was sent there, and she loved her grandmother, and she loved being in the countryside. And there she saw collective farms for the first time, men and women both working to repair roads. There was no distinction. Everybody wore the same clothes and repaired roads and worked on collective farms. So that was a different life. But she also saw that when they had to move from their city, Chongjin, to their rural countryside to be with their grandmother, they had to take several permissions and clearances. The trains were slow and rickety, and there were buses. The ordinary people were not allowed to own cars. Cars were only owned by party workers and people probably of the family of the great leader. So this is how life was. And children played a game, small children played a game called Shoot the Enemy. And this was always shoot the Americans and shoot the South Koreans. The South Koreans were enemy number 1. This was how it says. So when there was also something else that I found strange and rather frightening, when the hospital treatments were of very inferior quality. So when Jihyun's sister went to the hospital to deliver, she was asked by the sisters to keep jumping from the bed to the floor, which would make her delivery easy. So then you can guess how the rest must have been. This made children grow up with each other because the parents had no time to give them, and they used to be really very, very tired at the end of the day. She says in England and in her book, families need happiness too, not just misery alone. Our life was an unimaginably difficult one, and no one had the right to complain. This is what she says. Even when they worked for others, that is for the other farmers, or they did factory work, it was so exhausting and so tiring and so thankless that it instilled in them a sense of being alone that was called, it's called jiwi, and dependence on one's own self. It made your character grow because you only had yourself to rely upon. A thing that the North and the South Koreans shared was a word called Han. Of course, their language is the same. The Han meant a burden of reality. It comes from, only if you know Korean culture, historic and emotional burden of reality, what you experience around you. And apparently that's a word that's commonly used when you're talking emotionally to another Korean, and it's they say it's very difficult to translate, but it's very important to understand Han. In the 1990s, uh, uh, when Jihyun Park was working as a maths teacher, she got this job by her mother bribing the university authorities and the administrative authorities there. The famine began. This is because of natural disasters, but also because of the breaking of the Soviet Union. And this was a cascading effect on Korea, on North Korea as well. So it was a vicious famine that they went through, and the pupils stopped attending classes. So when she used to go to school to teach, she saw that her pupils were lying on the road, starving, sometimes able to put up their hands to beg for something, but not even that. And she just couldn't bear the sight of this. She saw little children foraging in the sewers to pick up a few grains of rice. And if a small child stole something from a shop, he was immediately picked up by the police. This confession that I mentioned to you earlier, if there was a lot of that, one person was accused intensely of crimes committed, which means not doing this or doing this, he was shot by a firing squad in front of his whole family. That was also quite common. So, as I said, there were many restrictions on their lives as well. And their day began very, very early. As I said, they could not own cars. And everything was scheduled to the last minute, from the time they got up till the time they slept. Now I come to the next part. So this is generally the life. I did see some gaps here, because was this only the life of her class of people? Did the others have it better, or did somebody have it even worse? I was not able to understand that, because that is not given. But then I thought it was her story, so maybe that's how it is. How did her family and she decide to escape? What happened? The father, who was a very loyal person to the North Korean government and to the great leader, the father completely revered him. However, he saw that his two very bright daughters weren't getting jobs. In fact, they were being downgraded wherever they were. And that his wife's Songbun, that is her class, stood against her. So he was extremely disillusioned. He was also disillusioned that the government was not able to handle the famine very well. He fell ill, and the mother decided to escape to China, because she feared that now there would be a crackdown on people like her who'd been doing smuggling. She never came back. Jihyun's sister Unni and her husband took the decision to escape along with their little daughter. And they said to Jihyun, "You must come too." She said, "But what about father?" They said, "We'll talk to him. He's very ill. He can't even get up." So they got his brother, who was living there with them, and said, "Please look after him. We need to go." They looked at father and said, "Father, should we go? Father, do you think we should go? We'll come back as soon as possible." And he somehow shook his head. So they considered that as approval, but Jihyun was never happy to leave an ailing father behind. Now they decide, in a very, very, very tortuous way, a long route, walking in the dead of the night with very thin shoes, with snow everywhere, crossing a frozen river, onto a rickety bus, then onto a rickety small, something like a taxi. They were able to get to the Chinese border. They were cold, they had nothing to eat, their clothes were frozen. But the little girl, a small 5-6-year-old girl, never said a word because she was frightened. And the sister also never said a word. It was all planned by the brother-in-law. And finally, they got across to the Chinese border. When asked by the Chinese guards why they were running away or why they were coming, they said, she, that is Jihyun, has been engaged to a cousin of their mother, And this is what we've embroidered for her trousseau. So it was traditional to have Korean embroidery on blankets, on their Korean kimonos, and so on and so forth. The guards seemed to be, the soldiers at the border seemed to be convinced, and they passed from there. Apparently, a lot of money had been paid to get this whole deed done. And they walked across the border and came to a house. They were in China now, and they looked around, but it was the dead of the night. And when they knocked the door and came in, there was their mother waiting with hot food. She hugged all of them. And then Jihyun realized that the mother was married. She'd actually abandoned their father, and she was married to a Chinese man. And the next day, she realized that they had paid 5,000 yuan, but that money was brought from the sale of Jihyun to a Chinese man. So the sister, the brother-in-law, and the mother were party to this whole sale of Jihyun, whose presence facilitated this movement from Korea to China. Therefore, this young girl was just taken away from her family, young lady was taken away from her family to live with that Chinese peasant, was extremely boorish, drank all day, beat her, raped her, and because he didn't go to the fields to work, she had to. So she says very ironically, I remember I had a choice to take agriculture and not do my graduation in agriculture and not mathematics. What am I doing now? If I'd done that, maybe I would have done this properly. She says that. And anyway, none of what she'd done ever came in useful. She has a son by this man, and she loved her son dearly. She called him Chul. Chul means sturdy or like iron. And that's where she lived with him. His mother gave her very little food, expected her to work the whole day. Chinese neighbors were kind enough to give her little food, knowing that she was pregnant, and eventually she had a baby. She said to her husband, can we not move out of your parents' home? Let's go nearby, but let's go into another house. So they do. And at that time, her husband is in a lot of debt. He's fallen into debt. And he keeps saying to Jihyun, let's sell our son so that we'll get money and I'll get out of my debt. But she knew that this man would not would get out of his debt temporarily, but again it would build up because he only needed to go and buy his drinks. So she refused to sell her son, and she ran away from the house one day. She was arrested and just sent away because she was illegal. She could not argue anywhere, and she was just sent away across to the Korean side. The Korean side, the soldiers didn't know what to do to her. Which kind of camp must they put her into? A correction camp, a political prisoners camp, a forced labor camp, or the absolute control camp? But since they considered her crime was economic, they put her into the forced labor camp, and her son was taken away from her. She had to again work from 4 in the morning till late at night on the dry fields, taking a plow of fertilizer and putting it in the beds of seeds that were planted. Prisoners were not allowed to wear shoes. Apparently there was, we do not know what the reason was, lest it made their running away easy. So she developed a cut on her foot by some glass piece, and it became, it started swelling and it became gangrenous. The prisoners threw her out of the prison, not wanting a death on their records, because she was recorded as an inmate in a windowless room. Now, with the gangrene on her leg completely swollen and black and blue, she didn't know where to go. So she went to the police station and she told them, and she said she'd like to go to Chonglin, and this is what had happened to her. Somehow a kind person facilitated her trip to Chonglin, which was her city, and she went straight to her building. Outside the building, she met her aunt, and her aunt started abusing her father's sister. So she said, you can abuse me as much as you like. Tell me, is my father alive? It's been 4 years now. When I left him, he was ill. Is he still alive? Aunt said, you have no right to know anything. She says, if he is dead, tell me where his grave is. I want to visit his grave. You have brought shame upon this family. Get out. But somehow the aunt saw her foot and gave her a little bit of money. Jihyun limped her way to the police station and said, do something with me, put me into some home. They said, we can do very little. And she went to the railway station and she lay down there. A kind old man comes and says, I have medicines for gangrene. He applies gangrene. She stays with that money on the railway station, spending very little every day on biscuits and something to drink. And her gangrene gets better. So that's how it was. Now, what should be her next step? She didn't know what to do. But her thing was, I have to keep some money to make a call to my mother to find out if my son is alive. And she makes a call. And the first 2 times it was rough. There was somebody who answered roughly, so she puts it down. And the 3rd time it was her little boy. And she says, Shul, this is Mama. And she starts crying and the little boy says, Mama. So she says, that's reason enough for me to just go across the border, risk it one more time anyhow, and, just meet my son. That's all that I have left. My mother has betrayed me. My sister and her husband have betrayed me. So she crosses the border with that little money, with a big group of people, buys herself some shoes and bandages, and she goes back into China. She has to be very careful of not being caught. And she reaches her mother's house and she finds her son and she takes her son and she moves away. She and her son walk towards the border with Mongolia. They decide they would just escape with whatever little they had or didn't have. So she says, Chul, you have to walk now and not complain. And he was just about six. So they walk and they walk and they walk, and there was firing from behind them. And there was another man walking along with her. There were many people trying to make it to the border. So he picks up the little boy. He holds her by the arm because she was still limping. And they go towards the border, but they're not able to make it. They are caught. They are brought back. And they are sent to a city far away, near Beijing. They lived there for 3 years as, people who were illegal because they were not allowed to move out. They were not allowed to escape. And then a very kind American Korean meets them. He is a priest, and they tell him their story. And he says that, by the way, they fall in love with each other. They live together. The Chul is with them. And subsequently, they live there for 3 years and they have 2 more children. So the priest says, you are a fit case for asylum to the West and to the UK, if I might suggest. So he takes them to the office of Amnesty International, as well as to the UK embassy. And he makes out a case for them. They don't know any English. So he writes it all. And on the 25th of January, 2009, she leaves the country. She leaves China with her 3 children and the man who helped her, who was now her husband, and lands in Heathrow Airport. Everything is so new and so raw. And she decides that they would move away from London and they go to this place called Barry, near Manchester, North England. And she just loves it there. She absolutely loves it. One day, a Korean film about her life was being made. And the lady was asked to translate it into English, but that lady was unable to come. So South Korean was found to do the translation. And it's from then on that the South Korean lady and Jihyun become close friends. And that is this other lady, Seh Lynn Chai, who's the translator and actually the author of the book, because she writes it in English. Now, what I did notice was, as I said, this book is extremely raw. Some questions came to my mind. That was, education was tough, she says. But what did this education consist of? Were there disagreements within families? How were they resolved? Yes, Jihyun's sister wanted to marry the boy she liked. So she just stood stubbornly. She did not argue. She said, I would like to marry so and so. Her parents said, no, you can't. You can't. He's of a much, much lower Songbun than us. And he's a fisherman. You are educated. She didn't argue. She didn't say a word. Then I wondered whether there was poetry, drama. What happened on a daily basis? Was there a weekend holiday? But from the impression I get, there wasn't. Every day was the same as the other. So I somehow got an incomplete picture, but that I thought to myself that that is what she wanted to narrate. And that's the picture, we get. The translation has no literary merit really, but as I said, it was just told to us about a world that existed there, a world I never knew, and I'm sure many of us didn't know existed and still exists. She says that the brutality that she experienced in North Korea comes predominantly at the hands of the state. I agree. But in China, it also comes from society around her. But I would beg to differ because she tries to, in a sense, say that North Korean society is more humane. But what about her own mother and her sister who sold her? And she hoped that her sister would build a house because they decided to live in China. They would use that money at least to visit their father and, see how he was getting along. But no, the sister and the sister's husband built a house there. And the mother also did not ask about the father. She was very happy with her Chinese husband. So this is what I thought. So as I said, there were several gaps, but the rawness of the whole thing, I was just not able to get over with. And I said, I have to read this book and I have to review this book. The other thing that struck me, this is the last point, is that there was a silent and unintended, point about the poison in the minds of the North Koreans and the South Koreans. When the two ladies meet, the translator and Jihyun, for a moment they couldn't speak to each other because Jihyun had never met a South Korean. And she was always told that they were evil, that it was a country that was poorer than ours, and that the Americans and the South Koreans together were the most horrid people. They were imperialists, and they were out to destroy our great country. This was the sentence that was told to them again, again, and again. So there is a lot of initial ice breaking that the two have to do, though their language, Korean language, is common. The translator, she tells us that whenever in third world countries or in any other country, they passed a North Korean because her father was a diplomat, they would look at them in wonder. Who are these creatures? They always moved in groups. And if they were going in a bus, school bus, and there was the other school bus there, they would make faces at them. So she said that this line drawn between the two countries had so separated the people. And I guess we can think of so many other parts of the world where such things happen. And that there's so much poison in the minds of people. Eventually, Jihyun just loves it in Berry. Her 3 children get scholarships because they all become very good at mathematics. They're all very, very happy there. And she feels that I need to do social service, to give back to this country that gave me so much. She says 2 things. They taught me happiness and they taught me freedom. And I was wondering whether one can teach happiness. So I was not sure, but I guess she saw people having the time around her, taking walks and going to parks. That's what she probably, missed or had never had all her life. And freedom, yes, the choice to pick up different things in a supermarket, to have friends, to do very many activities, and to just have time and leisure on her hands. So she just loved it. She worked during COVID, as she said, and she was the first person in 2021 the first Korean, British Korean to stand for local elections. I don't think she made it, but she was there. And she felt that the Conservative Party has more answers than Labour. So she said that I will always be with the Conservatives, and I simply love this country. And she worked with Amnesty International to be able to, on human rights, and to be able to get away just Koreans from their country and from any other countries with legitimate reason, to be able to move away. She taught herself English. She did her GCSE, which was the final school grade. And she taught English to Koreans coming into the UK. She made many friends, both North and South Korean. And they said, we've never had celebrations. So they used to have their Lunar Day or the Korean Annual Day. And they decided, both South Koreans and North Koreans there in the UK, to celebrate it with great fanfare. So I thought this was a story of a lot of courage, and that's why I made my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, questions, anybody? Please raise your hands so we can ask, and switch on your. Okay, I think Kaveri has raised her hand first. Come on, Kaveri, what do you have to say?
Thank you, Mukul. I mean, when I hear your account of this amazing woman, I just wonder what is it that was there in her to enable her to overcome this terrible kind of, reverses in her life, the tragedy that she faced, her own family, betraying her by selling her off. Is it a reflection of North Korean society in general, or was it just this family which was like that? And I always wonder how
I would
that
say,
country
yeah, at
survived.
some place I said that, that they had to do this because they were in such adverse circumstances. And other families might have tried doing the same thing, maybe without success, but things were so bad. And what she said, that whenever she was imprisoned in North Korea, she found college professors, teachers, doctors, and all of them imprisoned for things like this. So either on correction, re-education, correction, forced labor. For what? For little petty things, So what a gruesome life it must have been. It sent shudders in, through me. And that is why I said that though this book in translation too doesn't have literary merit, as one would look at literary merit, is a story that must be told.
Yeah, what an amazing woman. How
Yeah,
she
absolutely.
survived.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing spirit. And all this about the cruelty and the
Yes.
carelessness. Now, Kaveri said, being sold by her own family and so on. I think it is the degree of desperation for
Yeah,
survival
that's what I said. Yeah.
that you cannot afford the luxury of caring.
Yeah.
You cannot afford that luxury. So there are those passages where we are told that children were putting their hands into sewers, and, to pick out a grain or two of rice. I mean, it's so ghastly, It's sort of almost.
And Mohini, I have one small thing that I forgot to mention, but it's very important. Many girls attempted with their families to run out of North Korea into China. And, they got a lot of food there and they'd never seen so much food on the table. But because they were illegal and they knew that they'd be arrested anytime, these families that took them in wanted the maximum out of them. So if they were well built and so on, they kept them. But if they were not, they took them to what was called a girls' auction camp. So men came and bid for them. So sometimes they did away with their oxen, and these girls, were made to work in that. And she wasn't considered very reliable a buy, so she didn't fetch a lot of price. So it was this drunk man who bought her. So the payment was only 5,000 yuan because some others fetched much more.
She's so skinny, she's very skinny, so she's not going to be a strong worker. Mukul, you were talking about literary merit. So what I saw in the novel is not novel. I mean, it's not a novel.
It's an autobiography, actually.
Yeah, it's an autobiography. So what I saw was that it is mere statement of fact.
Yes.
Right?
Yes,
just a statement of fact.
Yes.
So style and all that doesn't come into it. It's
No,
a mere
that's
statement.
that's just, it was just a mention. I was not
Yeah,
expecting it.
Yeah, so I just wanted to compare it with a writer like Chinua Achebe. You know, there's that novel of his called Things Fall Apart.
Things fall apart. Wow.
You know,
Yes.
which talks about
Yes.
his community and his country, and that
Yes.
also is mere statement of fact. You know,
Yes,
there's no
yes.
style involved, and that novel also we read to find out about another country and its
Yes,
people
and
and
its
its
culture,
culture and its
yeah,
tradition.
yeah,
And of
yeah,
course,
yeah.
Achebe takes it to colonization. You know, the white
Absolutely,
man came
absolutely.
and what happened and all that. So I guess it's on par with that.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I
but-
think, Mohini, we need books like these from the third world and people who have, experienced something very strongly, and to be the stories to be told, because we don't know about so many.
Exactly.
Mukul,
Yes.
just the other week, Yogita Limay from
Yes.
she talked about girls being sold so that they would have money and medicine there. So it is not such a, it has become a culture thing, and people are talking about it much more so than before. So it's very saddening that this is happening.
Yeah.
But hey, ho raha hai. Okay.
Folks, would everyone like to switch on their videos now? You're so welcome to put on your video screens, please,
Kapila,
and join the
Guru,
discussion.
Deepa,
I think Latika had a question. Latika,
where's Latika?
No
Wispy has her
question,
hand
just
up.
a
a
comment
comment
that
from
without really mentioning it in that way, she has given a political background, political framework.
Yeah.
Because it's only inside that political framework that such a life can happen. And that there's an economic angle to it. There is a familial angle to it of the family itself. There's a health and medical angle to it. And just wanted to know, does she bring out any emotion at all? If it's
No, that is the
that,
whole
there's
thing.
no
because
emotion.
She said we were just drained of emotion. We had to work and work.
Just
And
horrifying.
every minute was accounted for. We could not do anything we wanted. So where do we develop emotions? That's what she was saying. And
So she
probably
doesn't
what
actually throw up any questions about the regime or about the government or anything.
No, she's angry when she sees famine. Then, the entire family's opinion of the great leader, his son and his son, it's all in one line, as you know, just falls because they were not able to look after the country and the people. And everywhere they kept saying that this was a great country. Was this a great country? No, they didn't think so. And at the same time, you have this infusion of Confucian values, where you had to, obey your elders. You couldn't raise your voice. You also couldn't raise your voice because your flat had a very thin wall, and everybody outside could hear you in the next flat. So they could be spies, or they could be people in party position. So they could report on you. So you have to
And that
be
was
very
encouraged.
careful.
That was
So
encouraged.
yeah,
That was
yeah.
encouraged,
Reporting
this
on
kind-
people was encouraged, even in school at a very
Snitching
young
on
age.
people.
1980,
You had to.
1984.
Yes,
Yes,
exactly.
yes,
Exactly.
yes, yes.
Wispy's hand is up.
Yeah, when Satish took it
Asma, एक minute.
out
Yes,
of my
Wispy.
mouth, so to speak, I saw echoes of 1984 here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what
Yeah,
she
true.
1984
mentioned.
was fiction, and yet he projected a similar sort of world, and this seemed to be the reality of that. So
Yeah.
I was struck with that, and of course Satish said it a second before I could.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, what was since it's more like factual, what was the time frame she's talking about? Which
Well, she came into the UK in 2009, and this book was written in 2020. I mean, it was written around then, but she stood for those elections in 2021. So this book ends at 2021 in a sense. So it's right now. I don't think
Quite
she
a quick
made it.
journey, isn't
Yeah.
it? Quite a quick journey from landing in the UK.
No, then she goes, and then she only gushes over how much the country gives her by way of refugee status. She gets a little house, it's heated. She's just fascinated by everything that if we travel to the West, or the people in the West live, there would be running water, the loos, you had a loo in your flat. So and my children got admission into school. And when they did well, they were the first son, that Chul got a scholarship. So she's just gushing about all that, and her friends next door, and the supermarkets, and what she could see in them. So that she thought was freedom, choice, warmth, and just strolling sometimes, and everyone, because she had this status, North Korean, yet to get, she had that little card. So everyone treated her with utmost kindness, is how she sees it, wherever she went, to the National Health Service or to something. So she said, we were used to being treated so brusquely. So, but yeah, so that's how I looked at it.
I mean,
And
that,
she kept wanting to give something back to this society and this country. So she said, I will do my utmost, I will work, I will, become a member of this party and argue for Britain, for Brexit. She was hell-bent on Brexit. She didn't want,
can you imagine coming from outside and
she
just
says,
saying,
Boris Johnson is a liar. He should not be our prime minister. He
My
was a good
goodness
man.
me.
She had all these views about his parties during COVID. So she talks about all that he shouldn't be doing. It's immoral. So she had this values
Amazing.
put together. I
More
found it
there are some new
interesting.
people here. Sarita, I've never heard her say anything. Shaheen, Sahyadri,
Yes. Maybe
Suparna.
Suparna might want to weigh in.
Suparna, there you are. Sarita has also got on. Sarita, then Suparna.
Suparna's here. Would you like to
Okay,
unmute?
Suparna. What's your
Suparna?
So I would really like to read the book. It would take some more time, but definitely I see an angle of lot of determination and grit. Also, this lady, she's showing
Definitely.
during the, and then it culminates into a little more positivity in her own life when she goes to UK. So it's a long journey for her. And I guess the book is also in a way a long journey, probably for all of us, for all the readers. So yeah, I'm looking forward to reading.
Yeah.
Mukul, I was wondering, do you think it took a lot of doing to keep emotionality out? To the refusal to be sentimental or melodramatic or pathetic.
But the one thing that's said throughout the book and said by others is the North Koreans are not, even the South Koreans, are not demonstrative. They're told by probably their religion also, whatever it is, to keep their emotions within. So they never were ever used to same things. For example, when her sister was 7 and she was 4, and her sister was taken away to the grandmother to stay there for 2 years, and she wouldn't be able to see her sister for 2 years. She felt terrible. She wanted to hug her sister, but she couldn't. So she just stands like this, like a little girl. And even when she goes to, when it's her turn to go, she said, my parents didn't, stand there and wave or anything like that. My father just took my hand and we went. And when I came back, even my grandmother, she didn't cry or anything, but my grandmother was very affectionate once we got there. So people in their own way were, but not demonstrating affection as we understand it. This is what.
Yes.
Deepa, 1 minute, let's get Deepa into the picture. Deepa, what is your take on it?
Mukul mentioned this book to me earlier. I haven't read it yet, but if I can borrow it from her, I'd love to read it.
So you're my
did,
neighbor, Deepa. You can take it. You're my neighbor.
Yeah, it's heart-wrenching to actually listen to these kind of,
yeah.
Absolutely. Because we get on with our lives so much and somehow just don't take an active interest in things happening in other parts of the world.
Yes, absolutely.
Living in our own bubble. But then when you actually read something like this, it prompts you to think, is there any other way you could contribute? Is there anything you could do to, maybe help people like this?
Yes, and look around you. There's plenty of people you can help out.
Yeah.
I think Naina is also there. Naina.
Yes, Naina's here after a very long time.
No,
and
she
she
came last time
joined.
also.
Naina.
Come on, Naina.
Please unmute, Naina. Please unmute.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Lovely to be.
Hi.
Yeah, I was not in India for a long time, so nice to be back. Yep. So I loved her presentation, and I think I will pick up the book and read it eventually. But what I wanted to say, my observation was, I've been to South Korea, and it's like a world.
Yeah,
It's such a different world out there.
absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
I loved Seoul, and I liked some of the other places we went to, and I was surprised because I went to this yoga center, which was set up by one of our colleagues there. And then, so it's very surprising that the same culture, but North Korea is so different and so autocratic, no?
Because of their military, their political.
Exactly, because of the government
Yes.
and the way.
Naina,
structured.
I agree with you. My vision also of North Korea is separate from that. But
Yeah.
I was going through the other parts of South Korea, not the capital Busan and only, but was going smaller towns because where the factories were, we wanted to check that out. So
yeah,
there I noticed that they were unaware of, first thing, they thought that this color was a tan. And they put some whiskey on it to rub it out to see whether it was so or not. No,
Yeah,
jokes apart.
Satish says in the rural area that he went to, the hostess of the restaurant had never seen a brown skin before. She was convinced that he just needed washing.
But surprisingly, they are not that racist. They like Indians to a large extent, and they're they're respectful of Indians there.
Yeah,
I found.
I had very good. Okay, who else are left there?
Leslie, would Leslie like to? Would you like to
Leslie.
unmute yourself? Yes.
Yeah. So the presentation was quite nice. What I found was the repression in North America is something which is unbelievable in today's world. Okay, and we in India we should be so grateful that we are so. It is to have things like today. You think of women being sold in an auction. I mean, so easily, just like that.
I know, unimaginable, right?
And another thing is that
actually that was in China, selling in auction.
Okay. So another thing.
Correct. Farooq is right. Yeah, that was.
It was in China.
That was in China, not Korea. Yeah.
So another thing is that in India now, maybe it's the present dispensation, present government, which looks down for things which are after organizations like Amnesty. You must have read in the papers how they are after Amnesty and all. And Amnesty is doing such great work in places like, say, North Korea. And remember, it's very, very risky. It's extremely risky. You see, there are cases of North Koreans who have escaped, and when one person escapes from North Korea, the story is that the entire clan is punished who remains back in North Korea. So you can imagine the amount of repression. Yeah, it is unbelievable, and probably the only country in this world where these things do happen. And if a person came out and spoke about it, it is really a big, huge eye-opener. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Mohini.
Sarita, 1 minute. Sarita has not spoken, neither has Snehi.
That's okay. If she doesn't want to talk, Satish, you can't make her. Mukul has something to say. Yes, Mukul.
No, just commenting on that emotion thing that you said. I think if they slept late, worked very, very hard the whole day, were up the whole day, and had to do their own thing, whether it was their homework, because it was said that the education was tough. They had lots and lots of homework. This is for children. And even for adults, there was always something that was physically tiring. So really, there was no place for emotion, I guess.
They were drained.
Even if they had it, they would probably, you'd be drained out by the end of the day. And this was the case with everybody.
Yes.
So
there was no energy.
No energy,
emotionality.
She says that we never talked to each other at the end of the day. When we were sent to farms during our summer vacation and we had to help farmers, we were so tired, we had so little food, and we were just drained, and those of us who were very young also had to work really hard, and there weren't enough tools. We had to cut with our hand. We used to get scratched and
Inhuman,
whatever.
really
Yeah.
inhuman.
And so
Yes.
she says, but that made us very strong. We grew up alone because we had nobody to consult. But the flip side was we were not able to develop emotions with our parents. But she said her father was a very, very good man, and she also forgives her mother finally when her mother was party to selling her, because she says, what else could she do? And she had also told her father, promised her father, that I will find my brother and I will save him too. Because again, there, that having a son was a very big thing. So the father said, you, I know, will look for your brother. But her brother, because he had deserted from the army, he was obviously killed by a firing squad. So I think this killing in front of the family is so normal,
Yeah.
Uh,
So Farooq has his hand up.
Yes, Farooq.
First of all, Mukul, excellent presentation. And what I wanted to tell you was that, a long time back, I had read a book about a ballet, a male ballet who had escaped from China during the time before China became a modern country after Tiananmen Square. The repression in China was as bad as what is now you see in North Korea. And the way he escaped, and many of the athletes used to be sponsored by the state to go for international events, used to escape, they used to find some way to migrate to USA and things like that. And the repression in China was very bad.
Yeah.
I was not able to understand why didn't she evacuate herself to South Korea and not...
Because they lived very close to the Chinese border.
Yeah, but ultimately she could have come down. I mean, just saying.
Even there, they would have been shot or something. And her mother had sent a message saying, I have made arrangements for y'all. Her mother didn't come back. They didn't know that she married a Chinese man, and she lived there. But she was told by her sister and sister's husband that we've got a message from your mother saying, just arrange your coming here. I'll do everything else. That's how they took the shortest route.
And then later on, she came to know that she has been sold to
she was sold to that, and she was given, sold for 5,000 yuan, of which they were paid very little. And then she does feel bad that my sister didn't use that money to go and see my father. She could have gone back, but she chose to remain here and build a house. So all sorts of emotions.
So basically, the way Soviet Union was before Gorbachev.
It was Soviet Union. It was, you said the right thing. Absolutely. That was how it was.
The way China,
the whole thing looks like one big gulag.
Yeah. But as I said, I found gaps. I mean, we have no idea of how the top class lived. And I was interested in this Songbun, which is what your class is. You belong to. So everywhere in the world, there is some class and caste system, You belong to a poorer Songbun. Her mother and mother's family never got into the Korean Workers' Party. So they were always in a poor Songbun,
Presently, China is doing a lot of repression in West China, where the Uyghur Muslims are there.
Yes.
And there also there are a lot of I mean, if you just go out of line, you're going to be this.
Absolutely.
And lastly, in YouTube, there are many travel videos which take people to the North Korea.
Yeah.
And they are probably, controlled tourism where people go and
see the best. Yeah.
Shown all the best.
So-called best. Yeah. And they have this unique thing about re-education camps. They have that in the Uyghur, among the Uyghur also, to reteach them their history and what
they want to make them into Han Chinese.
No, but even here, when you are arrested, it's you have a re-education thing because you ran away. Why did you run away? It's anti-national. So
in that piece that I gave you, and I talked about the film that was made in North Korea, and that speaks about corruption, it speaks about bribery, it speaks about famine and all that. But why are people imprisoned, tortured? The things that one can't believe.
Very small things.
For instance, for spreading a newspaper on the ground that may have had a picture of the divine,
if you're the great leader.
Or it could be that you're listening to a South Korean radio.
Radio,
or if you have a voice that sounds capitalist, whatever that may mean. Yeah. So anything will do to nab you if they want to. Every aspect of people's life is under control.
So through all that, the mother poor thing had no choice. She was entrepreneurial by nature, and she decided that she'd give her family a bit of a good time. I mean, But then when things were getting bad when the famine came in the mid-90s, she had to run away. She knew she would be arrested. And with their son deserting, wanting to get out of the army, there was really no way. They knew that she knew that the whole family would be arrested.
Farooq, you wanted to say something?
I just want to ask one question. I mean, just I'm going to throw a discussion out. Don't you think, Mukul, Latika, you have been a diplomat families and a country like North Korea, do you think sanctioning them is the right thing to do? Because they are, as it is, suffering such a lot. I mean, they are sanctioned from years together now. And it is all governed by the West, and the West makes the rules. And maybe non-sanctioning or a limited sanctioning will allow,
There is no guarantee that if you lift the sanctions, the people will benefit. There's no guarantee at all. In fact, I just wonder why the UN doesn't play a bigger role. In many of the countries,
UN also is governed by the
and today is the Dominican Republic, it could be Haiti, it could be any of those countries. The UN doesn't play a role. You leave it to the country.
The UN doesn't play a role in Palestine either, no? Latika,
no.
Become very
it is not playing any role in Yemen also. It is not playing a role.
UN doesn't have that power. Doesn't have that power.
See, the UN
we have peacekeeping forces, nothing.
These are all institutions made by the West for their benefit. Jis din unko kaam aayega, us din wo kare.
Farooq said the right word. These benefit, even now in that climate change, they are trying to push it onto the developing countries like India and the others. And they are the ones who have done the maximum damage to our weather and various areas. But they want now that we don't use coal, but they use coal all this while. They want us to
use Russian
not use so much fuel. They use all the fuel and they still do. But they want us to reduce. So it's not very fair if you look at it. Even talking about the 25 or 20, whatever you're talking about, that also is just a whitewash. Anyway, let's leave it at that.
Yes, so just one more. I see Snehi Kotak here. Snehi, would you like to start your video and unmute? I'd just like to introduce you to everybody.
May I leave? Battery's gone.
Yes, sure. I'm just starting my video. Just give me a minute.
Yes. So Snehi is an FY student who has started a readers initiative. I'd just like to ask her to comment on this book if she would like to, and B, very briefly tell us about what she's doing for readers of books. Snehi, are you there now? Are you ready?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Snehi. Hi. So she's at St. Mira's College. She's an FY student. And yes, Snehi, first of all, do you want to say anything about the book?
I would first like to read the book actually.
Only then I'd from what you've heard today, is there anything you'd like to say?
It was like something that definitely generated interest in me to read the book. And I see many emotions involved in the book as in the story as well. And the North Korean thing and the politics,
Right. So, okay. Now, can you just quickly tell us what you're doing?
Definitely.
About readers. Yes, readers and books.
Yes.
What are you doing?
So I run a literary arts venture. It's named Adventures of the Literati. And we have our annual season every November, where we have writers, poets, authors, and many other people from various, which was featured in the Times of India just on this Thursday, like 2 days back.
What was it? We missed you in the middle.
What was it? It's a literary arts venture.
Just 1 minute.
She calls it a literati venture, where authors, poets, etc. come together and speak, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's an
Okay.
online, it's a cloud venture actually.
Yeah. Okay. So I
Thank
think we
you.
should wrap up now. It is
Yes.
10 to 8. Snehi, good to have had you here. Do come again. Okay.
Yes, ma'am,
So
sure.
Mukul, thank you so much. I mean, you opened a window onto North Korea that none of us had looked into before.
Right.
So this is a learning experience. Every book is a learning experience in some way. So today we learned about a country and the way people live there and the way the government controls them and the cruelty. It seems such unnecessary cruelty, that we witness in this book, but now we know about it. So thank you for that excellent presentation. Thank you everyone who is present here today and who joined in the discussion, weighed in, gave their opinions. Thank you very much. Again, let me say, we are asking you to present also, okay? And I'm looking for volunteers at this point. So
And
look around.
we've got 3 books
decide,
down here.
and come along.
Please
Okay?
write to us.
Satish
Got
has
3
pointed
books.
out 3 books, and Farooq is going to put the pictures of the books out for you. And so I'll just say what we're having next. So we are going to have Priyana Munshi talking about Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky, 22nd of January. That's the next meeting. So you have enough time, all right? Because Dostoevsky is not something that you grab and hurry through. So this is time for you to get the book, read it, think about it, and join the discussion. And if you don't manage to read it, you will learn about it, okay, when Priyana tells us. So that is the next session that we have. And now before we close up, let's have the last word from Farooq.
Thank you so much, Mukul. What a revelation this was.
Yeah.
Mohini, you remember in the Ladies Tailor program, one of the participants mentioned about Empires of the Indus, a book, Empires of the Indus. So I purchased that book and I'm reading it. It is a very good book on the Indus River. And the author has captured a lot about the history and the background of the Indus River. That book was mentioned in the program. Do you remember that? In the Ladies Tailor, in the question answer session, one of our guests told the author, why don't you read this book, Empires of the Indus? So
we haven't. I don't remember that.
Yes, I do remember now. Now that you mention it.
But Farooq,
nice
after
book.
you finish it, can you pass it on to me to let me have a look at it?
And Mohini, Sam Pitroda has written a book. I mean, Satish also can. It's on redesigning the world. And in that book, Sam Pitroda has said that the world was designed in 1942 when just before the World War was ending and things like that, where the 3 big guys like America, England, France, and all
the allies
designed the world, And now the time to re-look at it again, because what you see in North Korea is just that, and what you see in so many parts, why UNO doesn't take part in it. So this is one good book, which is arriving Wednesday for me by Sam Pitroda. Some of the books can put people to think,
Absolutely.
Okay. Dr. Kulkarni.
Sounds good.
Dr. Kulkarni's latest book is going to be released on 8th of January. And I have booked him and said that within 2 weeks after your book is launched, etc.
What is the book about?
History about various parts of the
Uday Kulkarni, no?
Uday.
Uday
Uday
Kulkarni's book is going to come to me on 18th of December.
Okay. 8th of January, he's having a formal launch.
Yeah, it's a formal launch. But the book is going to be available on 18th of December.
Okay. So if you have it, I'll take it as a second reading for that. But what I said, he has said that after 8th January, you can give me a date and we'll have a talk on that. I said, great, we'll work there together on that.
He's the guy who wrote Maratha and Century.
All on that, yes. That's exactly the guy.
Presented twice for us, I think. Okay, so that's it for today, folks. Thank you for being here. Mukul, many, many thanks. Participants, thank you very much. See you soon.
Compliments of the season to
Thank
everybody.
you, Mukul.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Greetings of the season
Very
indeed.
interesting.
We're going to meet after Christmas and after the new year. So good
Acha, by the way,
wishes for everybody.
The program on the honeybees is postponed to 7th of January on the specific request of Leslie.
Oh, thank you.
Call me for Christmas cake. Huh?
Yeah, you're all invited for Christmas cake.
Welcome. Don't say that. We'll all line up there.
No, sure. Please.
इसका एड्रेस मालूम है, इसका घर मालूम है, उसका अक्का खानदान मालूम है।
Leslie, Christmas is a very big thing in Calcutta.
I know.
It still is.
Okay.
Okay, everyone.
Bye bye. Good night. All the
Season
best.
greetings to you all.